go ahead and get us started. Good evening, everyone. I will officially call to order this public hearing on May 6, 2025 for Portland Public Schools bond tax measure. My name is Harmony Quiros. I am chair of the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission. Welcome everyone to tonight's hearing. As a reminder, the TSCC is a community oversight commission established by the Oregon legislature more than 100 years ago. The commission oversees the budgets of all TSCC member taxing districts and annually conducts a thorough budget review and certification process. Another of TSCC's responsibilities, as detailed in state law, is to hold public hearings on all property tax measures proposed by municipal corporations under the commission's jurisdiction. TSCC holds public hearings like this one to give the public an opportunity to learn more about the proposed measure. We ask questions that we think a typical community member might ask. In that sense, we are here today to represent those community members who may not be able to ask these questions of you directly. We encourage community members to attend these public hearings and make comments and ask questions. Minutes of this public hearing will be prepared and retained as a permanent record of the proceedings. TSCC, however, does not take any action on the proposed tax measure and does not advocate for a position. This hearing is strictly to promote information sharing. I'll now ask my fellow commissioners and the staff to introduce themselves.
Good evening. My name is Matt Donahue, fourth year on the commission and PPS parent of a junior and senior at Grant High School. And my day job is as a municipal bond investment banker and financial advisor. I don't need to do well, I don't have any business anyway, so with the district, so no conflicts.
My name is Rita Moore. I am, among other things, a former school board member here in the district. Actually, I was in the other seat. I served 2017 to 2021, and I currently have no conflict of interest with the district.
I'm Allegra Wilhite. I'm Executive Director with TSCC.
I'm the budget analyst for TSCC.
Again, my name is Harmony Quiros. I am also a PPS parent. I have a second and a fifth grader at Atkinson Elementary in Southeast. I am also a former CBRC member and PTA president around these parts. But no conflicts with the district. I'm also a former teacher, although not in PPS. I taught middle school math and science and work in K-12 curriculum and assessment these days. Okay. I think we'll have district representatives introduce themselves as you come up to answer questions and speak. Does that make sense? Sure, nods all around. We'll start with public comment. I will now call on any members of the public who'd like to speak. Each person is limited to 3 minutes of public comment, and Allegra will let you know when you're nearing the end of your time. And I believe we have 3 members of the public signed up to testify. We'll start with the first one. I'll hand it to you.
Okay, and I would also like to mention that we have received written public comment as well from John Charles regarding the PPS bond and questions for the commissioners to consider regarding the bond. We do not read written public comment in the interest of time, but the full comments are shared directly with the commissioners and posted to our website as part of the meeting record. Our first member of the public signed up to testify today is Tom Bussey. Tom, if you want to come up.
Tom Bussey. I'm with the Libertarian Party of Multnomah County. I am a government budget fiscal analyst, formerly with the Oregon Health Authority. My question is, why are you doing this? Why are you here? The TSCC is in need of serious reform, and if you read the Oregon Revised Statute, it is very clear that this hearing should have been held within the 30 days between PPS proposing the bond and sending it to the Department of Elections for a submission to the voters. Everything discussed here is not in this book. It's not in this book. Any questions cannot go into a measure argument. This is ridiculous. Why is this woman preparing an independent, impartial fiscal and financial analysis that isn't put before the voters? So all we get are the selling points of the self-interested public schools. This is a bad bond. Your name is Supervisory and Conservation Commission. Just the other day, the City of Portland auditor came out with a report that they are $1 billion behind on infrastructure improvements. We need to conserve the tax rate for that, which should be a priority instead of building schools that are overbuilt for students who are never going to attend them. I recognize that this needs a change in state law, but the TSCC should have approval authority, which is the case in California with bond measures. They have to go before the County Board of Supervisors. That's not the case here. It's clear why this commission exists, and it's not doing its job. And as gubernatorial employees, in 2023, Tina Kotek said we needed a moratorium on new local taxes until 2026. Your job is to enforce the governor's mandate. So do your job, inform the public, or resign, leave, because we're just going through the motions here. This is a pointless commission. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Okay, next up we have John Charles.
Thank you. My name is John Charles, president of Cascade Policy Institute, a nonpartisan, nonprofit policy research organization. And I have followed the evolution of the bond very closely over the last 18 months, watched or attended all the hearings, testified 3 times. And I've sent you 9 pages of testimony, which I definitely will not be trying to speed read tonight. Briefly, I'll just say you're in the budget analysis business, so my question is, what is a budget? It has to be more than just a revenue figure and an expense figure. It has to be something that tells the public where the money is going to go. And the board members of the school district are bound by the prudent person rule. So the assumptions that go into something that is unknowable, namely the future of expenditures and revenues, the assumptions about the key items have to be prudent. And this is my problem with what they're proposing. They're not using enrollment data for the big 3 schools. It was decided, they said in public, well, we're not going to use enrollment data. That would disadvantage a certain school. So, well, if you're building schools and enrollment data, actual enrollment figures are not part of your calculation, where do you go with that? That's, prudent people don't do that. The all-electric schools, the so-called climate policy was never vetted properly 3 years ago, no due diligence on it. Now there's, according to the Cornerstone consultants, it's a $30 million premium, and they've decided they're going to build it anyway, even though the electricity sold by PGE is overwhelmingly comes from fossil fuels and will for a long time. $30 million for climate symbolism. Same with the green energy technology, the 1.5% premium that the state is imposing. In my testimony, I detail how that's going to be wasted here. So there's $50 million of climate symbolism that could be addressed. There's no specificity in the bill, in this measure. And finally, I'll say the Cornerstone report, which is something important, wasn't even read until after January 7th, which means either they don't understand due diligence or they just don't care. So my request to you is to not certify the budget or to certify it with objection, which I believe you can do, for lack of due diligence, lack of basically fiduciary duty. And I know you're not a regulatory body, but you have great moral authority. Thousands of ballots are sitting on dining room tables right now. If you express reservations about this, you can have an impact and make this not a meaningless hearing. So I hope that you will take that measure tonight to not certify or certify with objection. And thank you for your volunteer service.
Thank you for your testimony. Your written testimony and tonight's testimony will be entered into public record.
Thanks.
Okay. you. And our final member of the public signed up is Phil Schnabel.
Does anybody not have one of these? Well, here, just pass them out. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My name is Phil Schnabel. I'm a longtime member of the Board of Directors of the Alumni Association of Franklin High School, but I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here as a father, a grandfather, and a concerned citizen. 2 years ago, my granddaughter graduated from Westview High School. She had a 4.42 GPA, an honor student. I sat down and I wrote out a nice congratulatory letter to her, gave it to her, she opened it, she said, "Grandpa, I can't read this." So I had to read it to her. Now, she's an honor student. She's a sophomore down at the University of Oregon now. You've got a paper, I'm going to address the audience on this. I'm going to read it to them, and we'll get some reply. When in the course of human events, number one on the paper, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. What document did that come from? Anybody?
Declaration of Independence.
Declaration of Independence, correct. We, the people of the United States, in order to form our more perfect union. What document did that come from? That's the preamble of our Constitution. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty. What document did that come from? Gettysburg Address, correct. Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God. Where did that come from? Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington. Now, the fifth item is a sentence. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog's back. What is unique about that sentence?
It's got all the letters in that.
It contains every letter in the English language. Very good. Are you an educator?
Yes.
Oh, that's cheating. I'm not an educator, but I have been educated by your predecessors, and I thank you for that. Also, on page 2, you guys have it, they don't. As we speak, the legislature, there's a bill going through the legislature right now in Idaho that would require students to learn cursive writing in school and be proficient in that cursive in both reading and writing by the 5th grade. I'm almost done. I beseech you, we don't teach cursive in school now, but I beseech you, I implore you, reinstitute it. We've got a whole generation that can't even write their signature on their ballot when they vote. Think about that. Those kids, those people, that generation is missing out on all of these. I'll close with this. I understand. I'll bet my next month's salary that if we took the original documents, presented them to the graduating seniors of PPS, 90% of them, unless they were homeschooled, would not have a clue what they were looking at. To me, that is a shame. That is terrible. Every important document in this country
Thank you
is
so much for
cursive.
your comments. I appreciate it. Just to be fair to the others, we do have to.
Please
stick to our comments.
reinstitute cursive. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comments will be entered into the public record.
It will.
Not in cursive probably today, but we'll take it into advisement. We're going to go ahead and dive into our discussion, and I have the first question tonight. Again, a reminder to the district representatives, if you'll just introduce yourselves when you respond to help us understand as well. We understand the proposed bond package was informed by feedback from families, students, staff, community members. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you gathered that feedback and what gives you the confidence that these projects and the total size of the bond are representative of the majority of those stakeholders?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Deborah Kafori. I am the Chief of Staff here at PPS. Good to see some of you again. It's been a long time. Thank you for this question. Since the first bond was passed in 2012, there have been significant community involvement, attention, and interest in PPS bond measures. A community commitment was made back in 2012 to modernize all of our 9 high schools, and since then, voters have repeatedly voted to support PPS bond measures, and as a result, 6 of our 9 high schools have been modernized. The PPS Board of Directors began conversations about this specific bond in January of 2024, before I came here to the school district, and since that time, the board has met almost monthly in work sessions, committees, or full board sessions. Community members have continued to convey their commitment to PPS's approach with participation in a variety of GeoBond project forums, including community-focused design advisory groups, open houses, design workshops, and opinion surveys, and 2 public opinion polls that were conducted this year indicated strong support for the bond.
We've heard a lot of discussions in the community around the price of the proposed bond projects, in particular the high school modernizations. And even after attempts to reduce the costs for these high schools are likely to comprise the majority of the bond funds. Can you explain why these projects are so expensive relative to comparable projects in the region and around the country?
Thank you for the question. I'm Dan Young, Chief Operating Officer, and that's a great question, and there is a fairly lengthy response, which I will read. I will do my best to spice it up a little bit as I read. Portland Public Schools high school modernization efforts are, without question, large-scale capital projects that make up the majority of the proposed bond package. While it's natural to compare such projects with others across the country and region, it's important to approach these comparisons with caution. Capital project costs are complex and nuanced, and project costs are often calculated, grouped, and/or reported inconsistently, which makes direct comparisons somewhat misleading. A key challenge in comparing capital projects is the lack of standardized cost reporting. Project costs are often published or cited without clear definitions or consistent scope. Some sources report total project budgets, while others include only portions such as hard costs, omitting critical elements such as soft costs, contingencies, escalation, permitting, or management fees. This inconsistency usually is not due to a lack of transparency, but rather reflects the variety of ways that agencies define and manage and report projects. Without a uniform reporting framework, projects that are similar in scope can appear have vastly different public price tags, making meaningful comparisons difficult. As an example, I read an article here within the last, I would say, 3 weeks about a project, and that article presented the cost as total project cost, but actually it was just hard costs. So roughly represented about half of what that total project cost was. It wasn't done intentionally. It was just that is what the information that was available. Furthermore, several regional and local factors also significantly influence construction costs in Portland compared to other parts of the country. Some examples include, but not in totality, labor costs and prevailing wage. Labor is a major driver in construction projects. Budgets. Oregon requires public projects to comply with prevailing wage laws, meaning workers must be paid at least the rates set by the Bureau of Labor and Industries. Not all states have this requirement, therefore their wages are often significantly less. In addition to those states that do have prevailing wage laws, Oregon is among the highest with their average rates. Cost of living also plays a factor. Portland's cost of living is considerably higher than the national average. and even more so when compared to many of the growing suburban or rural areas where we see these cost comparisons to other high schools. Those high school projects are often in like suburban or rural areas, which are growing communities. Taxes play a role as well. Portland's businesses face comparatively high taxes when compared to the rest of the nation. Sustainability requirements. Oregon has many sustainability initiatives that are uncommon elsewhere in the country. For example, the state of Oregon mandates that public construction and major renovation projects of $5 million or more allocate at least 1.5% of the total contract value to green energy technologies. And while this policy reflects Oregon's commitment to sustainability and long-term energy savings, it does increase upfront project costs, especially when compared to states that do not have similar requirements. Lastly, market competition and geography plays a factor. Portland is relatively geographically isolated compared to other cities in areas where there's highly networked metro areas, especially on the East Coast. There's greater regional contractor mobility, which often increases competition and can reduce project costs, reduce bids in particular. So in summary, PPS's modernization projects are shaped by a range of local conditions that impact both the scope and cost. And while these projects may seem more expensive than others on the surface, it's essential to consider the broader context in which drives those costs. Now going further and comparing cost drivers from the Portland area to other areas in Oregon, when comparing Portland to other areas, there are some factors that produce higher project costs in many cases, not all, not being absolutist. Entitlement and permit costs, permitting fees, and jurisdictional approval requirements are generally higher in Portland than most other Oregon jurisdictions. Entitlement costs in Portland are significant. A single project, and some of PPS's recent projects have incurred permit fees that exceed $4 or $5 million just in fees alone. In addition, projects often are required to complete non-conforming upgrades and public right-of-way improvements, which can add tens of millions of dollars to projects. Urban site constraints also can add costs. Constructing projects in dense urban environments introduces substantial logistical challenges that often result in cost increases. I won't go through all this, but limited space often necessitates just-in-time material delivery, which add costs. Additional use of cranes, complex site coordination, labor hours rise due to traffic management, restricted areas. So kind of like the tighter the site, the more management, really the more hours that need to be put in as far as the work that gets put in place. And then another one notable is routine operating budgets. Other districts and organizations operate their maintenance budgets differently and have more resources for maintenance. PPS has limited capacity for ongoing funding of maintenance and capital renewal. As a result, the district places a strong emphasis on selecting building system materials with greater durability and longer lifespans. And while this strategy does increase upfront costs, it is a deliberate effort to reduce long-term maintenance burdens and extend the life of the key infrastructure systems. Lastly, there are values and requirements that are unique to PPS. One that's of note is Portland's climate crisis response policy. The climate policy prioritizes the use of low-carbon building materials and mandates that all new facilities will be constructed with fully electric building systems. Also, the district has equity in contracting goals, which are robust compared to many other, no, not other, but many other school districts. These enhanced requirements aim to increase participation from historically underrepresented businesses, but can impact project budgets by influencing procurement strategies, subcontractor selection, etc. I will speak to, somewhat briefly, the Cornerstone report. That was brought up earlier this year. A third-party Cornerstone Management Group completed a high-level cost comparison of 5 schools. 3 of those schools were PPS high schools that are currently in design: Jefferson, IW Wells, and Cleveland. The other 2 was Lincoln High School, a PPS school that was completed a few years ago, and the Beaverton High School project that is currently under construction. It's important to emphasize that no single factor accounts for the differences in project costs. As outlined in the report, multiple variables influence total expenses, including building size, the inclusion of specialized spaces, sustainability standards, market escalation, demolition needs, and site-specific constraints. But among the most significant cost drivers included escalation. The report cites an average annual escalation of 8%. That's debatable, but the report notes 8%. At this rate, construction costs roughly double every 9 years, and over a span of 5 years, increase 47%. So take any given project, 5 years later, it's roughly going to be 50% more expensive in this scenario. Specialized spaces are different between projects. Certain schools unique programmatic spaces, such as commercial kitchens, healthcare centers, teen parent centers, athletic facilities, and basements. PPS schools have many of these spaces, which drive up initial costs. And then sustainability standards, as mentioned before, compliance with high performance building requirements, including the all-electric, solar readiness, and low-carbon materials. So that's a lot. I'll go into, the report is complex and it's hard to compare 5 projects with 5, sets of different variables. So it's sometimes helpful to group those in 2 distinct comparisons, comparing the Lincoln High School project that was completed a few years ago to the Beaverton High School project that's under construction now. So I'll talk about that real quick. In the report, there's a table that attempts to normalize the costs based upon escalation, normalized escalation to get more of an apples-to-apples comparison. And after accounting for inflation, the Lincoln project was found to be approximately 15% more expensive than Beaverton. So not the same, but within striking distance. The report attributes Lincoln's higher cost to several key factors. The inclusion of premium space in the Lincoln facility. The Beaverton project, they actually have an existing 30,000 square foot kitchen and servery, so that is not part of their project cost, so that was a significant savings. PPS has more robust equity goals that contribute to some costs, and then the complex site logistics. When these elements are considered, the cost difference between the 2 projects narrows, and the overall are very comparable, they're very close. So kind of in other words, Beaverton and Lincoln, when you factor those in, have similar costs. Most people consider Lincoln to be a successful project. The total project cost ended up being about $225 million. So then it begs the question, well, if Lincoln is successful, is about $225 million, why are the projects that are in design significantly more? So when comparing Lincoln to the 3 high schools that are in design, and again, adjusting for escalation, the new projects, the projects that are in design are roughly 25 to 30% more expensive as of January. So some of this is a little bit dated data. These projects, all 4 of them, compare many similar attributes, so these similarities don't drive the cost. So they're all guided by PPS's education specifications for high schools, so they're going from the same standards. They all use the same delivery method, construction manager, general contractor. Beaverton uses that same delivery method as well. They're all currently in the same design phase. However, the report highlights 3 key differences between Lincoln and then the group of 3 in design. One is implementation of PPS's recently adopted climate policy, including the mandate for all electric infrastructure. This was adopted after Lincoln was already in construction, so it's not included in that design. Overall building footprints, the newer schools are, as the design was in January, were a little about 10% larger than Lincoln, and then expanded athletics due to Lincoln's location. It had very little athletic improvements on site, whereas the other schools have more expanded. So when those factors are all taken into place, the projects are comparatively similar in cost. And there's a little graphic in that document that tries to convey that.
I don't want to interrupt, but given we just have a short window of time, and I think I have the gist of what you're saying in general. Complex, roughly comparable to our regional things, but lots of factors are going into those high costs. So I'm going to let Rita take the first follow-up because I think we'll have a couple.
So the report noted a number of places where PPS might shave off some costs. One of them was the CMGC approach to managing the various projects. So I do have some questions about the cost comparison between, I'll grant you that things are different nationally. Things are less different in Beaverton, but they are different. So I'm just going to look at Lincoln. So if you compare the construction costs, there's in the chart, there's a section broken out for construction costs. And the costs for the 3 new high schools are significantly higher than they are for Lincoln. So Cleveland and Wells, the construction-related costs are almost they're almost double. For Jefferson, they're more than 2.5 times the cost for Lincoln. So, and overall, the construction costs account for about 12% of the bond total using the numbers in this report. So there may be changes since then. But, so can you explain what's driving those cost increases, and have you considered making any changes to reduce those costs? During my time on the board, I know, and I've been involved with PPS bonds since 2011. This CMGC model was always pitched to us and everybody as a cost-saving approach. Do you still think it's a cost-saving approach, and are you reconsidering the model?
Very good question. I'll start with the last one. I'll answer it, I guess, maybe somewhat simply. I mean, yes, we recommend continuing with the CMGC model. It is basically the standard for any project similar to this that you will find in the area. The Cornerstone, for example, recommends the CMGC model as well. I mean, there are other potential options, but the other primary would be to do a traditional design bid, hard bid, and that is very, very risky for projects of this complexity. You really just do not see it happen, not in this region. And I believe in the report there are some comments about the construction cost, but I think the question was specific to some of the pre-construction services and general conditions. Something to note is, one, yes, we are taking a look at that as we've looked at some cost reductions for all 3 of the high schools. We focused first on the reduction options that impact the design, because we need to design, that is to get the projects into design so we get into permitting and get into construction. So that's where we focus first. We're also taking a look at things like pre-construction services and general conditions. And those are more site-specific. And have to do with the sequencing and how the contractor completes the work. And there are opportunities to reduce that scope. PPS often asks for some more scope to be completed on the front end versus during construction, so that's why you see some of those numbers higher. We are taking a look at that. I'll also note that when you mentioned Lincoln too had higher estimates of that. It's now lower because that project's completed. The Lincoln budget when we started design was $240 million. The project completed for roughly $225 million. But right now, these projects that are designed, they're all forecast. They're guesses, they're estimates into the future, and so they're being conservative with what some of those cost. But we are looking for reduction options.
Do you think the costs are going to increase by 100% or 150%?
Or for the total project costs, or for
I'm talking about just the construction costs, that section of those budget lines.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain that level of increase?
Sure. So it's a good question. So Lincoln was completed 3-ish years ago. We're looking, so escalation of, I'm doing quick math in my head, these projects say 5 or 6 years of escalation. So that is the most significant increase in cost right there. And at Lincoln, the variables that were different between Lincoln and the projects that are now, CMGC is the same, the ed specs are the same, the equity goals are the same. What is different is the climate policy, which now requires all systems to be electric, along with other requirements. That doesn't just add cost to the systems, it actually adds square footage as well, because you have to have space for these different systems, you have to, for the batteries, for things like that. Also, the athletics is significantly different between, let's say, Lincoln, which is basically just a track and field, and then if you're looking at Wells, which has significantly more athletics.
I get all that, but aren't those increases, aren't those additional expenses related to those things you just mentioned? Aren't they in other budget lines?
No, those are the construction costs.
Can I ask a follow-up? You want to keep going?
Go
ahead.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so the project identified, and you have mentioned that the climate policy has some attached costs that are higher. So I was present at the creation of that policy. I wasn't there at the end. But I do know the policy was crafted to provide flexibility. So policies can be implemented in many, many different ways. And the policy accommodates, the policy was always considered to be aspirational. So my question is, given the cost profile that we're talking about, was the board ever given an opportunity to consider modifying the design specifications to conform with the spirit of the climate policy or any of the other policies, but consider the fiscal impact? Was the board ever given an opportunity to consider modifying the design to lower costs?
Sure, it's a good question. Dating back to the policy, I don't have total clarity, but my understanding of when the policy was approved, that there was not a cost impact discussion about what those impacts would be.
That is correct.
Okay.
That should
The policy
be changed for future reference.
is in many ways very specific. The most impactful regarding costs is the requirement for all electric infrastructure. And that is not just for new projects, that is for any new infrastructure going into the district. So all projects are impacted that have electrical and mechanical type systems. Each one of the high schools, they go through a process where we call comprehensive planning. So before we start design, we go through comprehensive planning. The board approves the comprehensive plan for each project before we get into design. That comprehensive plan is pretty detailed. It includes the scope, the schedule, the budget. The budget is informed by a third-party cost estimate. All three of those projects were approved for the budget that the district, they were approved, and all those projects moved into design. So there was an opportunity then to have discussions around total project costs and how to reduce those costs. Earlier this year, I guess late 2024, there was an effort to look at cost-saving measures for those projects. And the Cornerstone report is a part of that and notes that the climate policy is a significant driver. The board did provide some direction to look at some potential limited reductions to that, but by and large, the desire was that the bulk of that design and those impacts remain within those projects.
Thank you.
The last two bonds that we've had, the cost estimating is hard, right? That's what we've mostly heard tonight, right? These projects are complex, costs are changing. There's certainly a lot of uncertainty in prices about construction right now and into the future. I'm curious, there's a big bucket of the bond, the vast majority are for the 3 high schools plus whatever might be left over for elementary and middle. There wasn't enough money in the 2020 bond for Jefferson, right? That's part of what's coming back with Jefferson in 2025. Can you give us just some, and time is of the essence for our evening tonight, but can you give me a brief idea of like, what's the likelihood it sticks to these costs as we projected? What's the contingency as part of those cost estimates? How much do you predict could be or would be left over for elementary and middle school upgrades after the high schools are built?
Yeah, thanks for the question. There's a couple of contingencies built in. One is the total cost, the amount, budgeted in the bond for the modernization work exceeds the estimates and budgets for the 3 high schools. So there was a little bit built in right there. We've also gone through a cost reduction effort. We're in the middle of it that we're looking to reduce costs. Also, the bond has a program contingency which is there and intended for if and when there are unanticipated additional costs. So there are some risk management strategies there. That said, all of it is crystal ball. It's looking into the future, and there's a lot of uncertainty right now. What I want to just kind of note is where the budgets come from sometimes is unclear. You just see like a big number. People are like, I don't understand what that means. The projects like the high school modernizations, the biggest estimate comes from a third-party professional construction cost estimator. So it's not done by staff. What we do is we take the designs at whatever level complete that they are. We provide it to a third-party cost estimator. They give us their estimate back. So what it does is it gives us some third-party validation for the bulk of the cost, and then we have to add soft costs and things like that to it. So what I can say is the information we have now is the best available information. We have a couple of risk management strategies built into that, but again, predicting the future is hard, especially for a total bond that's outside just the high schools is going to go probably 10 or 12 years. It's hard to predict what 10 years is going to look like from now.
Okay, I'm going to move on to our next question. I think it's still in this vein. The PPS board is planning to build larger schools in a time of declining enrollment that is projected to continue into the next decade. The Portland State Enrollment Forecast from last July projected high school enrollment in 10 years of about 11,000 students. But these three projects will build out high school capacity to around 15,000. The board appears to be taking a if you build it, they will come approach. What if this turns out to be wrong? What if the plan, what's the plan if enrollment doesn't recover? What are the fiscal and opportunity costs of overbuilding capacity at the high school level? We'll start with that.
Sure. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Renard Adams. Excuse me, let me start over. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Renard Adams. I'm the Chief Accountability and Equity Officer for the district. The PPS board has directed the district to build high schools for the next 100 years, not just for our current forecast. We believe that having state-of-the-art modernized high schools will support Portland's effort to recruit new businesses and new families to our city. In addition, district staff are preparing and working on an enrollment campaign which will highlight the positive things occurring in our schools and provide principals with toolkits that will help them encourage neighborhood families to choose their children, to send their children, to PPS school. In addition, our superintendent recently addressed this in the media by saying that there's really not a situation where we can see that a newly modernized community invested high school will go empty or ever be half full because of other programming options we could use the high school space for.
Has PPS done any analysis of what level of additional housing would be required to support that level of increased enrollment sufficient to warrant this capacity? I mean, we see it's not just people opting out of PPS, although certainly that's an enrollment factor, but it's also declining birth rates in the city, let alone the capacity for housing. So can you give us kind of the bigger picture?
Sure. Well, we're well aware that the city faces a severe shortage of housing for all income levels. And if I could also wrap up, I think what your next follow-up would be as a response. Just last week, the superintendent met with Portland Mayor Keith Wilson and other school superintendents from Multnomah County to discuss a variety of these issues, including housing. The mayor informed the group of his plan to incentivize housing production by temporarily waiving system development charges. These are fees that the city collects from developers to cover certain costs, including increasing the capacity of municipal infrastructure like parks, roads, water, sewer, and pipelines in order to accommodate the new growth. So we are in discussions with the city and the mayor. I can't say that we've done analyses on their sort of housing crisis, but we are aware of the challenges and believe that with a first of its kind enrollment campaign, there's not been one like that since I've been here in my almost 4 years, we'll be able to hopefully make a change in our enrollment projections that are projected to decline for the foreseeable future.
One last follow-up around that. So the focus on high schools first, or primarily creating a robust high school system in which people want to go. doesn't quite answer the question of the first K, for pre-K to 8, right? We have lots of issues in our K to 8 schools. This morning at my kid's school, faulty fire alarm sensor. Kids sat on the field for about 45 minutes this morning while the building was cleared, and then the sensor was dismantled so that it won't happen again. We had problems with it 3 weeks ago, but we also have an aging boiler that keeps the temperature anywhere from 55 to 85 degrees in the school, usually reasonable range. But there's lots of reasons that families may not be encouraged to send their young kindergartners or their first graders into our aging schools at that level. And these large dollar amounts for our high schools, while part of the system, don't address the full needs of the system. So I'm just curious what how the distribution of the bond funds, right, up to our tax limit, this much for high schools, this sliver for elementary, middle, how that was determined.
Can I add an addendum to this? So the 2012 bond included 3 high schools. And the sort of common wisdom is that all of our high schools are being built out to 1,700 students. That's not accurate. Roosevelt was built out to 1,500. And the argument was in the existing enrollment didn't warrant a 1,700 capacity, and Roosevelt could be expanded as enrollment increased. Has anybody considered that kind of approach? Like, you have an actual estimate from a demographer about enrollment population, and we're talking about not even the probable enrollment, the possible enrollment at the high school level. Has anybody considered decreasing the size at this initial build out of the 3 high schools with the understanding that if enrollment warrants, you can always add?
It's a great question, and certainly the district's needs are broad and far beyond what any one bond could address. And there are difficult decisions that must be made and ultimately are made by the board. There have been different scenarios proposed of how the district might approach the high schools or might approach enrollment. Roosevelt, correct, was an example that was built to a smaller classroom capacity, but the core spaces, such as the assembly spaces, were built to 1,700 with the intention that there would be a future phase, and there have been future phases. But that has not been the desire, and that's not the direction that has been chosen for this bond.
Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks. I think this one will be quick. So in the 24-25 budget, you anticipated continuing to spend down bond proceeds on capital projects for 2017 to 2020 bonds. So for 25-26, how much in bond proceeds from those prior issuances are you planning to spend? And what's the anticipated timeline for finishing projects related to those bond approvals?
We have approximately $700 million remaining from the previous bonds, and we anticipate all that work will be complete in 2029 or 2030, somewhere in there.
And I think there was a little, I mean, at least for me, maybe for some other folks, just what is the split for the Jefferson build between 2020 and the new proposal?
The current funding available from previous bonds for Jefferson is $366 million. So the 2025 bond includes about $100 million based upon the current estimate for Jefferson.
Okay, thank you.
So looking back again at the 2020 bond, a visible example of unspent bond funds and unmet commitments is the Center for Black Student Excellence, which TSCC has asked about every year at our budget hearing. Maybe we won't this year since we have this one instead. Can you tell us the latest on this project? What and where will the center be? How will it function? How will you know if it's making an impact on improved student outcomes? Where are we at on that project?
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Nicole Watson, and I am Senior Director of Family and Community Engagement. We have been actively reevaluating the Center for Black Student Excellence, a project to ensure that it fulfills its original attempt while adapting to our current conditions. The initiative is still very much active and alive and definitely moving forward. We are currently exploring options for the future home of the Center for Black Student Excellence and expect to bring a clear recommendation to the board in the very near future. Our internal steering committee, which is composed of district leadership from legal, from finance, operations, real estate, communications, and community engagement, has been meeting pretty regularly to align on key milestones related to the property, acquisition, programming, and public accountability. In terms of function, the center will serve as a district-wide hub dedicated to culturally affirming, identity-safe, and academically rigorous programming that uplifts Black students and families. We're anchoring its success in measurable outcomes tied to student belonging, access to culturally relevant resources, and increased engagement across our district.
Trying to frame my follow-up. This is just one example in the bond, the big one, right, of hard to see results from the 2020 bond. I'm curious what the district wants to say to voters who are worried that this is evidence that we can't commit to what we say we will in their bond, right? Voters are voting for what's on the paper. And there's an expectation that that's going to happen, right? And that we're going to see the results of that. And I think, you know, we've sat at this table for the last 5 years and asked the question, and I hear in the near term, we've heard that for 5 years, and I don't mean to be pushy, but I, like lots of voters, want to see it, right? We think it's important, it's a value, it's part of the reason that the 2020 bond was passed. So is there a timeline when we'll know that it's this building, that it's going to look like this? It will be available to students and families then, right? Like, what is that timeline? When do we actually expect to see a building in place with actual functioning programs that are supporting our families that every day need them, right? It's 5 years later, we still don't have even a clear concept of what that looks like, at least to the public. And I think we're still, and those needs are continuing to go unmet in our community.
I definitely understand. I think what's important to note, I am just getting up to speed starting in February, and having since started in February, convened our steering committee of all of those groups of our finance, our legal, our comms, better to wrap our brain around kind of what is happening, what the intent and the true nature of the Center for Black Student Excellence will be. I kind of stepped into this role acknowledging that the journey has taken too long. I think that the frustration and the silence and the uncertainty is warranted, and yet I can tell you we're moving quietly and very intentionally to ensure that when we do share much of what we can share, that it will feel like a load up for our families and our communities.
So I think we understand that tax rates are hard to predict, like everything else in the future. It's just kind of a theme this evening. And since the 2012 bond, I guess it was the district has been making a commitment that the tax rate will be $250 per thousand or lower. I mean, I guess, how confident do you think you are in these tax rates? What is your kind of view in terms of projecting them? Is the 250 like a ceiling, starting to feel maybe a little bit more like a floor, like it's going to continue for years and years and years? But yeah, so if you could just discuss that, that would be great.
Thank you, Commissioners. Michelle Morrison, Chief Financial Officer for PPS. I am happy to answer that question. We have been doing a lot of financial analysis given the recent historical information around assessed values and real property values, and then our current history in terms of that renewal rate. We are currently below the 250 per thousand, and so we anticipate a similar experience moving forward as we move through our bonds, and that's our commitment to the community.
So you put a lot of cushion in there when you're projecting this, right? 'Cause-
We are
Go on.
generally very conservative in our estimates, yes.
Yeah. So for this new bond, and I see that the district is actually selling bonds tomorrow morning, bright and early, for debt service in the following fiscal year to be paid off in that 1 year, which kind of closes the gap and prevents a drop off from having happen. So is your anticipation that the debt service for this new bond is not going to start till 26, 27?
That is
fiscal year?
correct. That is
Okay.
correct. Thank you. And it is early tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
I know we're getting close on time. I think the next question is important, and then we'll give the district the final word.
Although elementary and middle schools have received some improvements in envelope integrity, safety, and accessibility under the series of bonds since 2012, with a few notable exceptions, they remain in urgent need of modernization. What is the district's plan to address the needs of elementary and middle schools when debt capacity will be limited for the next decade or more if this bond passes?
Yeah, thanks for the question. As we noted earlier, the district has deep and broad capital improvement needs. And the majority of capital funding comes from general obligation bonds. So we will utilize the funds that's in the bond to improve the elementary and middle schools. And we will aggressively go after all their potential resources. We go after grants on a regular basis. We've got significant funds from the city through PISA funds here recently. So we look to get creative and be aggressive in any opportunity we have to improve our facilities. We look to capitalize on it.
Do you have you contemplated going out for any future bonds to cover elementary and middle schools? And if so, when?
Sure. There's no plan to go out for future bonds between now and roughly 8 years. This is the idea to go out again and build a debt structure to allow for an additional bond under the current rate. That said, the district always has the ability to go out for additional bonds and incur that additional debt service.
At our bond hearings, we always like to give the district the last word. So this is your opportunity to tell the voters what is the most compelling reason to vote for this bond. And it could be one of you, it could be a board member.
I believe that needs to be board member.
Yeah. Let's go. Yeah, they're in the room.
You can get an outgoing and a. Oh, sorry. We got the whole team.
We'll take you all.
This should give you a sense of the unanimous support, both across board members, but also candidates who are running. And I'll just start as a PPS graduate and somebody who has student in PPS for 18 years. In the 18 years, there were no measurable improvements. The long-term bond plan that was put together in 20. Oh,
You might
state
wanna
my name?
Yep.
I'm not used to having to do that, the meeting. Julia Brim-Edwards, PPS board member. It's my 12th year on the board. And our buildings are more than 75 years old. A very wise set of community members crafted a long-term plan to improve our buildings, both in terms of improving health and safety, but also modernizing our buildings, starting with the high schools. We've stuck to the plan, and I think that's benefited our community. But most important, and I would say most importantly, there's no rate increase, so we're keeping that promise as well, but we're also making, continuing the modernizations and making significant investments in the health and safety and accessibility of our elementary and middle schools.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak too. I just want to also kind of address. Thank you. Sorry. My name is Eddie Wong, board chair. Thank you for being here. I just want to, one concern I want to address and then also talk about why, right? So the concern I want to address is that, the issue that we're building our schools too big. I just want to kind of really point out, right, that as a former teacher, when we build our schools to 1,700, you do not want to fill up our schools to 1,700. That means teachers are on carts, kids are losing instruction time because it takes time to set up classroom. It is detrimental, it's very tough, and then we have behavioral issues that we see in a lot of our schools that are overcrowded. So when we talk about high schools, typically, teachers teach about 6 out of 8, period. So that's about, we're talking about 80% would be considered the max. So a 1,700 school would actually be at capacity safely would be about 1,400. So kind of, take that into account as well. The other thing is also kind of want to reiterate that it, these ideas of cost savings, if we delay this bond, what that also means is that the cost savings that we're trying to get will probably get eaten up by inflation and time delay and things like that. So, you may want to make a smaller school and you save $50 million later, but guess what? That's going to delay it for another 3 years at least. And that's $50 million is probably going to be eaten up. I mean, that's just kind of the unfortunate thing. And then here's the reason. Us as a board we strongly stand by our original intent in this whole thing. We started this project in 2011. Thank you, Rita Moore. And in 2012, and the idea is that we build all our high schools to be modern so that every kid, no matter what your zip code, will eventually end up in a world-class modern school. And this is the finish line, and we're almost there. And so that's why we are really pushing hard for making sure not just building our schools nice, but also robust. And that also contributes to some of the costs. We want these things to last 100 years or more. And so again, the issue is our priorities are that we want all our students to be able to experience this, no matter where they live in the city. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Herman Green, Herman, last name Green, Greene. Thank you all so much for being here. It is absolutely imperative that we do this. You stated earlier that we're doing stuff for our high schools, but what about the elementary and middle schools? And I assure you that part of the reason that I question and I say the things that I do and I scrutinize every dollar the way that I do, the way that I'm asking that we check for the contractors, make sure that we're not getting ripped off somewhere down the road, that we're making sure that what we're paying is absolutely what we need to pay, not because I want to decrease the bond, but because I want to save some additional dollars, because those dollars need to go back into our elementary and our middle schools. So I'm not saying by any means that we need to decrease it. I would have actually preferred that it been more so that we can take the excess dollars and take those back to all of our elementary schools and our middle schools so that we can ensure that the 8 out of the 12 years that they're actually in school systems that aren't high schools, that they actually want to be there. We need to pass this bond so that we can not just get our high schools finished, but so that we can ensure that we can have some excess dollars that will go back into our elementary schools and our middle schools so that we can ensure that those kids actually thrive in getting their education. While we're sitting here saying, I'm not sure if we should, every dollar that we get, we scrutinize. The way that you're scrutinizing, you should. Every one of us should be scrutinizing every dollar, not because we're saying that we don't need to get it, because we want to make sure that we can put those dollars where they need to be at and not just going into somebody's pocket so that they can have a fatter Christmas. I'm trying to make sure that our elementary schools and our middle schools have, you said the heat wasn't working or something. You said, you know what I'm saying? Aren't you tired of that? We need the bond to pass. If we don't pass this bond, they're still going to be stuck in those raggedy schools. We need to do something so that we can get all of our schools at top tier level, and it takes money to do that. It's not going to be wishful thinking. It's not going to be, man, I hope. It's going to be intentionality. It's going to be us as taxpayers putting ourselves in these types of positions so that we can say, I'm not doing this for just for today. I'm doing this so that I can ensure that my kids and their kids and their kids and their kids will actually be able to be in a building that can sustain them. And it takes us doing the work today. So if you're watching, for all of you out there, because I'm on TV somewhere, say yes. Say yes to the measure so that we can get this done, not just for us, but for our kids and their kids and their kids. And thank you all so much for being here. It's good to see y'all. And this is what it feels like on this side of the table.
I'll be very fast. My name is Christy Splitt, and I'm also a school board member, Zone 1. I want to keep it simple. A great city needs to have great schools. We know that we have work to do in Portland Public Schools, and that includes to our physical buildings. We have an opportunity to invest not just in our kids and our schools, but in our city with this move. And at a time when education funding is in jeopardy, when state funding is inadequate, the only thing that Portland voters can do to improve our schools is to vote for bonds and vote for levies when they have the chance. And I think that our folks in this city are invested in our schools, want to continue to invest in our schools, and understand that this is our chance to make a difference for our kids, our schools, and our city. Thanks.
Thank you so much to the board and to staff for joining us today. This is an important opportunity for additional questions and public comment and discussion around the bond. We wish you the best of luck. We will be back in 6 weeks to talk about the budget, hopefully with good news. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I'll adjourn.